go. Hey, everybody. Welcome to another Friends Talking Nerdy. This is Tim Jousma. And with me, as always, I have the holiest of holies. I have the wiggly Reverend Tracy. How are you doing?
I'm doing better now. I'm just having all sorts of technical difficulties today. As I mentioned to you, I thought I was going to be late because my door decided not to shut when I came home. And then I decided to pop over to make sure I was actually in frame because I don't just stare at myself while we're recording.
Right.
And that's the wiggly, guys. So sorry about my last minute. I was adjusting myself is what I'm saying.
There you go. In a ladylike way. I do have to ask, how have you been sleeping this week?
I am doing a little bit like I'm sleeping. Why? Oh, that is such an ominous question.
Well, I was just wondering, because of how you got the votes for the Battle of State Supremacy 2, I figured you wouldn't be sleeping that well, so I just wanted
to. Okay, I was like,
I had that one saved already.
I didn't realize there was a joke saved, so I'm sorry. I wish I'd been in tune. I would have played that up with like, oh yeah, like a baby, and instead I'm like, did I tell Tim about a night terror recently?
No, I was trying to bring the jokes here. Just what a week it has been. Just like for me, school has been the big thing. My work has increased exponentially, and that's a good thing, but it's also kind of wrecking. It's like my idea of what I thought my free time would be is kind of quickly vanishing. So it's like trying to get an idea, I guess, of, what space I have to kind of book for like school, what space I have to do for personal stuff like the podcast here, which will take some time. And from what the professor says, by the time I figure that all out, then it'll be next semester. Then I'll do it all over again. But yeah, today, man, I had a little issue with the computer again, which made me quite upset. I had to use my computer in the other room, and for folks that may not know, when I bought the computer, like last week when we were interviewing Pixie for the show, before that happened, I had used the computer that day and then tried to plug it back in with the AC adapter that Alienware provided. Didn't work. So before we had to record last week, I had to rush out and buy a universal AC adapter, got it working again, fine. But today I had to unplug it and use it for something else, and the universal AC adapter was giving me some trouble charging. So I got upset there, which upset the professor, which I felt absolutely horrible about, because I was just ranting and raving like, fuck Dell, and then she gets upset because, it was kind of triggering her, and kind of understandably so. I mean, it's like sometimes being 6'5" with a loud voice, when I'm certainly passionate about something, I don't always realize how that can come across. And, just after that, I just like, felt like shit.
Yeah, I get you. Like, feeling triggered is actually just inherently contagious, especially when you are either, you want to call it a nesting partner, or you have like a husband or a spouse or a live-in partner at all. Like, you get more in tune, and that's where that empathy can really grow. Mm-hmm. And so you realize how quick you can spin each other out into just this, then you're both triggered. Like, I've very genuinely thought about like trying to think of a safe word, just because like that way when you realize, that you're feeling that triggered, and then it's like, wait a second, I think we're both triggered, and now we're just triggering each other. Like, I've almost thought about trying to see if I could set a trend of there should be a safe word, like with couples that live together. So that you could say, hey, like, I think this is totally nonsense cuckoo pants at this level, like whatever this has exploded into, because usually you'll find that you're fighting over something that had nothing to do with what originally even got you in that state. Because that's it though. Like, there's a lot of that temperament around. It's like people are really kind of sensitive, and I don't want to say sensitive because that makes it sound like that's a bad thing, but it's not. But people do seem to be kind of on edge.
Well,
understandably.
Understandably, yeah. I mean, with the past year, everybody's had pressures have been up overall. So, I mean, that is not to excuse, the outbursts I had at Dell earlier today. Not trying to give excuses here, but everybody is on edge, and everybody is, quote unquote, triggered at things in ways under normal times they may not necessarily be. So, I mean, there is that, but the big thing for me is just, it's like you don't ever want to put your partner into a situation to where they feel bad like that. And it's just, especially for something as silly as being upset over a computer. I mean, I have every right to be pissed off. You spend the type of money on this computer that you do to have it start falling apart after a couple weeks. That's not acceptable. And, at this point, I would, I would take what I said initially about receiving the computer about Dell and just wrap it up with, don't buy from Dell. When a company makes it that hard to try to take advantage of, the manufacturer warranty, for instance, it's like for all the complaints I have against Apple, and, I have some very, very legitimate complaints, when it comes down to it, though, if the AC adapter on my Mac is broken and I live in Nebraska, just hop on their chat, talk to them. They will ship one out to you within a couple of days. And they will also have it notated that happened. Now today, I spent 45 minutes waiting to talk to somebody. And then by the time I did, they said, we're busy. Can we call you back later? And I was like, fuck you, and hung up. So it's been a unique day, but thankfully the recording is here. So this show means a lot to be able to just kind of do it, have that thing to look forward to, so
yeah,
we're here.
We are here. See, and I know, so speaking of people's moods and things we were doing to prepare for the show. So something that I did want to talk about was my most recent, like some of the stuff that I've seen. I know I kind of pepper it in, but I haven't taken a second to actually talk about the latest season of something, especially if it's not something that we're watching together and doing it review style, like where we really dig into it. So if you haven't listened to those yet, some of you guys might find those enjoyable. Just, little side note to the other parts that we do of Friends Talking Nerdy. Yep. But yeah, so I wanted to talk a little bit about Solar Opposites, and I was knowing that that's not a show that I think you would even be into, which is why we'll get there. But and I'm glad, and it's not one that I personally will be putting up, which is why I wanted to talk about it. And Tim, I think as much as, you and I can even disagree on stuff, I think you can agree that I try not to be like an inherently negative person. So I wanted to go on and try to have an attempt at some internet banter to maybe have something to add to my dialogue other than 2 thumbs down, which was my initial review of season 2 of Solar Opposites. Yeah. And for those of you that don't know, it is a show, I think it's Dan Harmon or something like that, but it's definitely Justin Roiland, who is, you hear it from the intro. He's the voice of the main character. You hear Rick Sanchez from Rick and Morty. And so there's a lot of expectation that this would be a lot like Rick and Morty, which is a show I really love. As you couldn't tell if you ever saw the mural in YouTube, if that ever made it, or my Meeseeks jars or my Snuffles. I like that show a lot. I had lost access to watching that show. And so I had gone into Solar Opposites with an expectation to fill that Rick and Morty shaped hole in my very limited TV viewing life, because I don't watch a lot of stuff. So if I'm going to watch something and be kind of committed to keeping up with it, it's got to be really good content for me.
Right.
That is the thing I will say. Just because I don't like it doesn't mean I'm insulting people who do. I'm just saying it's not my bag. Yeah. So enter the internet, where I wanted to go. And I will admit, my first post was kind of not the best, because it just said 2 thumbs down, not watching the 3rd season. But last time I posted something negative in a public space like that, it was kind of in the before times. And I don't think I realized how easily bent out of shape some people might be right now. And understandably so. I'll still throw it out there. We're all kind of going through this kind of trauma together. It is what it is. Yeah, so I don't know this person's life, but I made somebody upset. And
how did you do that?
By just expressing that I didn't really care for this season, and that I wasn't sure that I was going to go on and see it for the 3rd season.
Well, how dare you have a contrary opinion on the internet?
That's dare I
mistake
disagree.
number 1,
I disagreed with somebody that I did not even realize I was disagreeing with. That's what was funny, is it wasn't that there was a post this is the best show ever, and then me going on there, actually I thought it was this, and this. It wasn't even like that. I did my comment was one of the first few on there because it seems like they're plugging it through Facebook. Because there were very little, and there's still not even a ton on. Because I shared it with you, so you could go read. Like, hey Tim, can you tell me if I'm batshit? Did I deserve that weird spiral of crazy? Because I do that. It's called, that's the shadow work stuff that we've talked about. Like, hey, please entertain me if I could have handled this social interaction better. But anyway, so that was one of the first few comments on there, and the first thing he did was like reply with some gif just saying that my opinion was trash. And I went and deleted it because, to be fair, all I had said was 2 thumbs down gif, like, guy, and like, not a good season, don't plan on watching. And I could see where that came off dickish, so I removed it. So then it was just bantering with other people who were already expressing that they either weren't interested in the show or that they didn't care for the season, and that's where that other thing came in that you saw.
I want to clarify though, that's statement where you said you did not care for that season. Now, was that your own post, or were you replying to somebody?
That was my own post. It was that was the first interaction I had with this human that decided to just get to a different level.
That is ridiculous there. Now to your point, if you like, I don't like the people that like on stuff like Facebook or Twitter that if somebody says I like something, I don't like the people that come back, complete strangers that come back with your opinion is wrong. I think it's bad, so everybody should think it's bad. No, fuck you. you know?
Yeah, and I just
works.
Right before we got on recording, I got like a reaction of somebody mad at one of the things, and that's where it's like, hey, like, did I say anything insulting? And you're like, no, and I was like, okay, because I just saw so and so is angry, and I was like, wow, people really take opinions. Yeah. So basically, I don't know, I wound up kind of sharing like opinions are actually, to me, neither right nor wrong, because they are an opinion. Now, if part of your opinion does involve a fact or a non-fact or something that can be proven as fact or not fact, well, then it's still not your opinion that's wrong. It's the fact that you're basing your opinion on being wrong.
They call that like a logical fallacy, right?
Right. Like, it's not that you're wrong. It's, I mean, I've accidentally said stuff like I used to still believe that the taste buds were in all different regions because I was taught that at one point in science. And then I looked it up and realized, oh shit, that was something that's totally been updated. And I was like, okay, well, now I don't say that anymore. It's a difference of just whether or not you know that your opinion is based off something that's actually true or something that you just either think or believe or whatever is true.
Yeah, and that, I mean, when it comes to like expressing our opinions, I mean, obviously the person who responded to you was a complete jackass, but in general, people do have a problem of talking a little too much in terms of basing opinions on something they may not know, and yet you find that most people get defensive if you call them out on it. I'm thinking of a couple of things here, like Hank Azaria for one. I read an article recently to where he actually came out and formally apologized for voicing Apu. And the interview kind of went kind of in depth into his process. And he talked about how, at first when, the whole brouhaha with Apu was occurring, he got defensive. And it was just like, I know in my heart I'm not doing anything wrong here. But, he talked about, taking the time to actually talk to people and then hearing stories from, Indians or Indian Americans that have to deal with the stigma of Apu. And, he ultimately did the right thing and changed his mind. And there's another person that I think of too. There's a YouTube creator by the name of Lindsay Ellis who came out on Twitter and said some comments. I'm not sure the specifics, but my understanding is that people took the comment a wrong way and essentially took it, as racist or something. Instead of her coming out and saying, I didn't, say this as clarifying as I could, let me restate it, or just deleting it and apologizing, she has since come out with like an hour and 40-minute video on YouTube about how cancel culture people are coming after her. It's people don't want, a lot of people in general don't want to be confronted with the fact that their opinion just may be wrong.
Right. And we've talked about that before, right? We've talked about the opinion bias, and we've talked about even feeling triggered, and all of those things basically just collided between me and this human on the internet. But basically, About solar opposites, guys. By all means, watch it. There's 2 seasons of it if you have a lot of time to kind of give something a shot. There is actually a subplot to the show that is amazing, and it's the whole story about the wall. And basically, one of the characters keeps shrinking people that displease him, and he puts them in this kind of like habitat that he built in the wall, and there's this whole story about these shrunken people. And so my point where it's like, I have a problem liking a show when the most enjoyable part of it is a subplot and not the main characters. Like almost to the tune of if it split off and the wall, because there's a lot of people who refer to that storyline as the wall. So
Right.
if the wall like split off and had its own show and was no longer any part of Solar Opposites, my personal opinion on it is that Solar Opposites would probably tank really fast. And I don't know if they've got different writing teams, but it almost feels so different, like between the two. And I don't know. My brother, you guys know, anybody that listens, I have a trend of mentioning my brother's opinion. He and I talk a lot about shows. That's where I get some of the recommendations of what I watch. He is apparently still on for the wall, and I don't think he's an idiot for wanting to continue watching the show. Just going to throw that out there. But it is like, I would totally love if a fan, because my brother gave me this idea that somebody might actually try to cut those wall things and almost make it into a condensed thing at some point where it's just like you can watch a movie about the wall, and I would watch that. Even if they did that, like the producers, if they decide, you know what, people like the wall so much, we're just going to do a mini series where we've cut most of the Solar Opposite stuff out that doesn't need to be in there and just leave the wall story. That story is epic and kind of worth following. But the rest of it feels just a little phoned in the sense of they seem to really be banking with those characters on just kind of making fun of other shows and movies. Like it felt like more this season than last. So that's really the only negative thing I have to say. Out of the good banter on that Facebook post that I did get some good out of, somebody reminded me there was a really excellent callback to a character in the first season that I actually totally kind of had spaced on by the end of it. And then Pupa is one of the characters that's like this larva guy, and he's mostly nonverbal. So he's really, or he or she, I think it's just an it. But Z's really funny.
and we will bring that up. Hey.
yeah, we could totally touch on that too. Like, if not to spoil that too much, but maybe we could touch on it in the end. But yeah, like the little Pupa character is really funny. So there's a lot about it that is enjoyable and worth watching. So please give it a shot. Let's have a conversation on our group that maybe doesn't get aggressive and trying to intimidate people through the internet, guys. We can be better than that.
I mean, it sounds like this show's kind of suffering from what like the Cleveland show did when that spun off from Family Guy. You know, obviously this is not a spin-off of Rick and Morty. It's a completely separate venture, but you got it sounds like Dan Harmon is using his name to kind of, you know, help get the word out there, like how Steven Spielberg will produce somebody else's movie, but it's just a chance to have like Steven Spielberg presents Back to the Future, something like that. So maybe it's that, but that's another thing too that you brought up. It's like one thing you learn as a podcaster is that you want to engage your audience, but especially when you're talking about unknown people out there, you don't know how they're going to react. And I've always been a little trepidatious about, you know, talking about stuff because of the fact that you get idiots coming back and forth. Like I think of with the WWE moving the WWE Network content from their own servers to NBC's for the Peacock Network. What NBC did is they started editing some segments from older wrestling shows that don't fit today's standards. And one of them was from 1997, where a group of white guys in a stable in wrestling is like a group of wrestlers banding together to help each other out. And usually you'll have stable 1 face off against stable 2. Now, stable 1, bunch of white guys came out dressed as guys from stable 2. The second stable were all black guys. The guys from stable 1 were all white guys, and they came out in blackface. And you had people that were just like upset, like this is the greatest moment in professional wrestling history, and how dare they remove this one segment, you know. And then I tried to clap back with, so you're telling me wrestling is at its best when it's about blackface and racism? You know, and they just
are you sure that's the pony you want to back?
Yeah, I mean, because like it's, you know, wrestling does have a checkered past when it comes to racial stuff. I mean, it does. I mean, granted, the argument that they would make is that generally the characters they have, regardless of race, are two-dimensional. They're meant to be a type, which is the argument that you have. But when you come, but there's a tricky slope. Because like in the past, for instance, like people of Samoan heritage in wrestling, in the past would definitely would be portrayed as like savages, and stuff like you couldn't headbutt a Samoan because their heads are so thick it would hurt you, and things like that. You couldn't do that today. Well,
I mean, I just want to throw out there just this thought really quick that entertainment in general has had a history with, racism, bigotry, whatever you want to call it. Like, it's had that problem. So it doesn't surprise me. Of course wrestling would, because it's part of the entertainment where they're trying to reach a broad audience. And we all know, like, look at Disney and the crows that were in Dumbo. Like,
Song of the South. Song of the South. I mean, that's a movie that they let go into public domain because they don't want to touch that.
And for Disney to let something go into public domain, like, you have to realize how rare that is for Disney to let something go into public domain. So we have to, like, I guess we don't have to anything, because there I go. We have to. We don't have to, but it would be nice if we could realize that things do evolve. And I'm not saying you should, like, have your kids sit down and watch, like, all of the old stuff, but we don't necessarily need to demonize it and erase it either, because hey, who's to say that that isn't something you can sit and watch and it just leads to a conversation with your child about how, like, hey, we learn new things and we evolve as a culture and then we move on. Like, that's where I get a little, like, we don't need to necessarily delete it. I'm not saying be, like, proud, and I'm not necessarily going to be one of those people that, like, pickets to save it or anything, but I just don't see the deleting of our history and us not always having the right idea about everything as being, like, the best idea.
To me, it's a tricky slope to kind of slide down, because I mean, you take a look at a movie like Gone with the Wind. I mean, Gone with the Wind is racist propaganda. I mean, it clearly is. There are distortions of history that put the South in a light that it does not deserve. But that film is a landmark in film history. That film is a great film to watch. And yeah, if it got to the point to where films like Gone with the Wind were like taken out of circulation and people didn't have a chance to get them again, yes, that I have a problem with. But I don't think the Gone with the Wind comparison applies to each and everything. I mean, because like take Looney Tunes. There are plenty of Bugs Bunny cartoons in the public domain where Bugs Bunny is in blackface. Does the history of Bugs Bunny need to include that? Yes, but does that mean that Warner Brothers still should have no problems putting it out and making money off of it? I would say no. I think they made the right decision in saying, let's let this one die, because when it comes to Bugs Bunny is not the racist character. You're not missing anything out of Bugs Bunny or his adventures by taking the blackface out of the equation. And I think for when it comes to this particular instance in wrestling with this particular scene, this particular segment that they're referring to, I think that this is one that can bite the dust. But that's another thing too. The segment in question, they may have edited out of that particular episode of Monday Night Raw. However, they have another show, a documentary show called The Monday Night War, and footage from that segment is very much still in there. So it's out there. Fans still have their copies of it. So it's not that it's being erased per se. It's a case-by-case basis. And while I think wrestling fans that grew up in that era, that watched that era, would get that it was that the group that came out in blackface were not trying to make a racial thing, that they were just trying to make like trash talk the other guys. It's just looking at it in today's eyes. If somebody that did not know the history of these people and was watching wrestling for the first time saw this could be something that would turn them off. So I'm not gonna, they made the right move. They read in this particular instance for this one thing. But again, it is a case by case basis, because you don't want to go to a point to where you silence everything that could, rise some passions in somebody just because it could potentially get a negative reaction. Sometimes we need to explore these darker things that happen in our society, but through wrestling, not so much.
Yeah, like I think it's safe to say that if you can cut it out and it changes nothing about the main storyline, like it's okay. Just let that piece go.
Yeah.
I could kind of see an argument about the purity of it, but it's like at the same time, it's fine.
With the thousands of hours the WWE has to put out every single year, this 10-minute segment is not going to make or break anyone's enjoyment at all. So that to me, that's the difficult part about talking to people online about stuff you like in the arts, because you're going to get people that will come back and defend. I say that in quotes because they don't have any real arguments as to why it needs to stay. But you'll have people that will argue this, or if you just say something that's contrary to what they believe, they're going to attack. It's like you want to engage as a podcaster, but it's just like, what avenues do you do it? And to your point, I think the best avenue that we can have is do our best to try to start that conversation among our friends. That way they, in theory, would be able to go on their social media and be like, I had a great conversation with a Friends Talking Nerdy Crew about this. Boom, that type of stuff is positive.
Yes.
But,
So I guess maybe next time I'll just ask a question in our group and be a safe space for conversation. Don't take it creepy, guys. Just FYI, like if you're the type of person, because I'm not going to say you're wrong if that's how you get your serotonin is like getting into little spits and tiffs or whatever, like you do you, boo. It just doesn't work for me. But if you're that person, please don't take it to the level where you try to like creep info and try to intimidate them. Like that's just the one thing. Try not to be that human. Have your disagreements, get your serotonin feelings. It's temporary, whatever, do you. There's just a limit. But
and as admins of our social media outlets, I know that is something I will not tolerate. And if I see a message like that, I'm going to delete it. And if there's continuing nonsense from the same person, then that person would be blocked. Now, the people part of our group, that's not going to happen.
Oh, no. So far, that's never happened in our group. You guys are always like really great in there. So, by the way, if you're not in our Facebook group and on Facebook, please go find us and join the conversation. We try to have a good time in there.
Yes. friendstalkingnerdy.com. You'll be able to get the links to where all we are at in social media. So there's that. But I've watched something else as well. The last week's episode of the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, the ending shook me. That it was probably the best scene that Marvel has put out. The build up to it is this. At the end of Avengers Endgame, Captain America, you find out, went back in time to marry the love of his life. And he came back as an old man and gave his shield to Sam Wilson, the Falcon. And the whole premise of the Falcon and the Winter Soldier is that Sam had some doubts. So he gave the shield to be put in the Smithsonian. However, the federal government decided they needed a new Captain America, and they enlisted a guy by the name of John Walker to do it, who also has a comparable character in the comics. And what we learned throughout the season so far is that Walker essentially has imposter syndrome, feels he has a lot of shoes to fill in terms of kind of comparing to Steve Rogers, but what happened is that you got a big villain in the show that somehow got their hands on some super soldier serum, similar to what Steve Rogers had, and is giving it to people. John Walker got his hands on some and used it. And then at the end of the last episode last week, Captain America brutally beheaded a guy with the shield. And just... and that sounds horrible, and it is horrible, but with how Marvel built it, I thought it was absolutely beautiful. I think of a comment I heard on Twitter that sums it up brilliantly. What we saw was this. Captain America is the America that people achieve and want. John Walker's Captain America is what America is today. And that's what the beauty of what this show is kind of doing, and what, stuff, genre entertainment like superhero stuff, like sci-fi, like horror can do in terms of using it as like an allegory to talk about today's world. And just, having the last image be John Walker holding the shield, and the bottom half of the shield is like covered in dripping blood. That shook me, because like I watched it, I was like, no, 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 and just like, I like thinking about it now, I still get it, just like it was well done. It was well done, and I really cannot wait for tonight's episode, because the creators have said that we will definitely see a new character today. So I'm excited. But just what I'm liking about it is that it does allow for the conversation to be had about America in general, in terms of how we as a country are using our might. And, more often than not, we go the John Walker route. America, I believe this country, for me personally, I believe this country is worth fighting for. I don't believe in the whole American exceptionalism thing that Republicans, get hard boners over, apparently. But I believe that this country, when put to the test, can and will do good. But, we haven't lately. And it's nice to have a TV show, even a TV show as silly as a superhero TV show, kind of testing people in terms of, do you accept this? Is this what you want from a hero? Is this what you want from your country? And going on from there. So really, really good show, and I can't wait for the next episode tonight.
Yeah, I mean, haven't seen any of that. I don't do a lot of like live TV. I've got my Hulu and my Netflix, but there are shows that are running like new episodes that come out. Like I've really been enjoying The Great North. If you are a Ron Swanson fan, I'm totally blanking on his name. Nick Offerman.
Yeah.
Nick Offerman. If you are a Nick Offerman fan, he is in there. I believe it was Jenny Slate as well. I could be misquoting that one. Sorry, I don't have it in front of me, so forgive me, internet. But it is on Netflix. Really, really good show so far. I'm enjoying it. It is, especially like if you're in the Pacific Northwest. I know it's technically about Alaska,
right,
but there's a lot of very relatable humor if you're up in the northern states. So that one is releasing one at a time. So we just keep waiting for the next one to come out. But another really good series that if you're looking for something to watch in its entirety is This Is a Robbery, the world's biggest art heist. And it is on Netflix. The episodes are kind of long. Usually I kind of, when it's a docu-series, I almost like it better when it's like under an hour or even like little 30-minute chunks for me.
Right.
But it was really good to watch. It was very interesting. And it's something I wasn't even aware of. It happened like in the early 90s. And the stuff is still missing. So I guess what we have joked about, because in part of the documentary, they end up going to Maine and Boston, which is where I'm about to move. So I've decided that the reason myself, the Reverend, and the Mr. Reverend are going to end up in that area. So we must be like the chosen ones to solve this $10 million mystery, because that's the reward for it. If you can find like any information on any of the artwork, they are still offering like a $10 million reward. So This is a Robbery, the world's biggest art heist. Super fascinating to watch if you're into those kind of docu-series.
Yeah, the Professor and I told you about this. We actually watched a Chris Rock documentary on Netflix last night called Good Hair.
Yes, I saw that one years ago. But so what are your big takeaways since you've seen it recently?
Yeah, well, it brought back a lot of memories. My ex-wife was black, and kind of seeing how black women in this movie kind of go about all the things they have to do to kind of maintain the quality of their hair and whatnot. It's like I lived that. They even talked in the movie that if you are dating a black woman, there is going to be a financial investment involved because of stuff like the hair care stuff, and I know when I was married to her, that's when I learned about stuff like weaves and all this stuff that they do and the differences there. But the couple of big takeaways for the documentary for me One is how, like, what you will find is that for stuff like weaves or like additional stuff that they'll have on, like, women have the ability of going to like a beauty salon and buying hair. Sometimes it could be fake, but sometimes it can be human hair. And what the movie goes about showing you how they obtain it. And it's really sick, to me, because they obtain it primarily from India. And how they obtain it is by by the companies that exploit people going through a religious process called tonsure, I believe it's called, which I guess every couple of months, man or woman in India, they end up shaving their hair. And then what the church that they do that, or whatever they call it, I don't know the specific name, but what the church will do is collect that hair and then sell it. They said that the one place that Chris Rock visited makes like the amount of money they make is second only to the Vatican. And apparently the people that are giving their hair for free are not aware of it. And that was horrific, because it's like, for me, like if I was facing a situation where I needed to pay some money for rent, and I saw an ad in a paper that, for $500 or $1,000, we'll give you that money to shave your head. I know a lot of people, if they were in a pinch, that have no problem doing that, because like a couple months, you're back in business, and especially a guy like me, who cares? But but it's like, I would have no problem with it if these people were made aware of it. If they are voluntarily doing it. But you have stuff like, they even talked about, like, women have to deal with guys that will break into their room at night and cut their hair off. Which was again, the big problem I have is not with the fact that people are doing it. If they are voluntarily, consensually giving their hair away, that's on them, but the religious organization that's profiting off of these people while they live in abject poverty, that is evil. That is absolutely evil.
Yeah, I didn't even remember that part of it. Because like I said earlier, it's been years. Like, I watched that back when I was still living in Arizona, and I moved here in 2009. So it's been a minute, or not 2009. No, I moved here in 2015. I was in there between 2009. So sorry, my bad. I moved here in 2015.
Then you must be thinking of something else then, because this came out, I believe, in 2018.
Did he make a new one?
Possible.
Okay, that might require, because I'm pretty sure that, I know memory can be funky, but I'm pretty sure I watched that a long ass time ago in Arizona. Well,
the good thing about this, I am bringing it up. Oh, I am incorrect. It looks like it did come out in 2009. I was then I
wait. Can you finish the year for people listening? What year?
Good Hair is a 2009 American documentary film.
Wow, yes, that makes sense, because if it was the memory that I'm remembering of the apartment that I was in and who I was with, I moved to Arizona in 2009.
Yeah.
So it had to be within those first 3 years that I was in Arizona. So that totally checks out. Yay, my memory is not great. So that's a small victory for the Reverend Tracy. But maybe he remastered and added something at all? But we could totally look into that.
Yeah, it's certainly possible, because I could have sworn, like, the hair competition, the weird competition they had amongst the stylists, like they had like one woman who wanted to do something simple, quote unquote, and what she ultimately decided was simple was having a big water tank to where she would cut people's hair underwater. And, because that made sense to her. But even Chris Rock was like, and you think that's simple? And you know,
I may have to check it out again. But the thing that I really remember was him talking about how early they start some of this hair practice and the chemical burns on these very tiny children. Yeah, the relaxers, but it's chemicals that they won't even touch with their own bare hands, but they're putting it all the way to the scalp on, some of these are really small kids.
They said one hairdresser said the youngest she did used relaxer on was a 3-year-old, and they actually interviewed a 3-year-old. And the big thing that stuck with me was the scientist he spoke with. It was a white scientist about halfway through the film. When he was made aware that black people use the chemical that they use for relaxant, he was absolutely shocked. And what he did as an experiment experiment was he took the chemical compound that they use, put it in a jar, and then put a can of soda in that jar, and then came back to it after a couple of hours, and they were all like disintegrated. Like one was even so bad that like normally, like if they have like put something in a soda can in a chemical, like the aluminum would melt off, but like the inner plastic that keeps the drink in there would still be there. But like it was just corrosive, and like I felt so horrible at the end of that movie, because it's like this whole concept of good hair is simply a racial concept. You know, what is considered good hair is white hair. And the fact that, you know, black women have to put themselves through these torturous methods to get quote unquote good hair is just so sad, especially when, you know, they talked about like, you know, like men or women that you use like their natural hair, afros, braids, or something like that. You know, that's beautiful. I mean, they had a scene in there that I felt horrible about, because like they had like 5 women. One woman had like a natural afro, a pretty big one. And then they had other women that did their hair, and then all these women that had their hair done on a regular basis. You know, it was organized, but they were, you know, told the woman with the afro that, you know, it's unfortunately, if you came in for a job at my place, I would not hire you with that hair. And the woman was beautiful. And it didn't matter if she was beautiful or not.
Man.
You know,
I've seen some beautiful hair like that. Like I've seen the natural hair that has just stopped me in my fucking tracks in downtown Portland. And like, especially just some of the, I think some of it is absolutely gorgeous. But I'm not going to tell anybody that they're like wrong for wanting to change their hair. Like I wouldn't want it to be for a reason for thinking that their natural self is bad, though. Like that's the thing. Yeah. I wouldn't want that for myself. And granted, like I of course used to have some practices because I thought the natural self of me was not so great. And you know, I don't do some of that stuff anymore. I just felt it was kind of like makeup every day. If you look at studies of what it does to skin over time, it is not really that good for your skin to do every day. Yeah. And I used to feel that need to do that every day. I don't do that anymore. I'm not going to go and tell people they are wrong for doing that. That's not my job. If they feel like something's going on with their skin, which is what the case was for me, they have access to the same stuff that I was able to find on the internet, and they can make their own decisions. But yeah, like, but my wish for everybody is to have the most healthy reasons for wanting to do something. And you know?
That's the thing. I like they interview Ice-T in the documentary, and you know he's a character, but you know he had the big thing of kind of going along with your point that, you know, if you are going to do something like get your hair done, or, you know, as he said, get some fake tits, you know, just celebrate it, you know, just if it, you know, just, but don't do it for you. Don't do it because you feel it's expected for you.
Exactly.
And I think that's the big thing. And I think, you know, one other thing they commented in the video too was, you know, how people react, you know, to hair and whatnot. And it's just, it made me wonder, like, I don't know if there's anything I could do per se to, you know, help make it better. Maybe there isn't, you know, but maybe the fact that watching this, you know, if there is something down the road, like I can talk to my kid about or something, I don't know. I mean, it's just like, I hate the fact that we have a society where, you know, stuff like this happens, to where people feel they have to be somebody else in order to be happy. And that's the ultimate sad part about this documentary, you know, that on top of the fact that, you know, 99% of the black hair care products starting in the 90s was essentially bought out by white businesses. You know,
you mix those two and you realize where the money's going. And
because especially since the 90s, it's you know, like if you look at like hair care products for black women, if you even can, that's the thing. You can only find them in certain neighborhoods. It's just like the hair is always, you know, like smooth, what they consider good hair. Like Chris Rock had a thing in the movie too that I thought was interesting, where he went around to different beauty shops with quote unquote black hair, which were wigs, and tried to sell them to the people there. And then it just, you know, it's just a sad practice over people that want to just look nice throughout the day. There's nothing wrong with trying to look nice,
It
but
really isn't.
when you're dropping at minimum $1,000 for new hair, and you do that on a regular basis. I mean, they talked about women that will get their hair done and start layaway plans for the next time they come in, for the hair
Yep,
that they bought.
I remember that part, and that's like it's something that's kind of just ingrained in our culture, though. But doing anything out of obligation is going to breed resentment, and
Yeah.
that's just a thought I wanted to put out there. Like, and me, like, I don't want to tell people what's worth prioritizing, right? But even I've had friends who are similarly complected to myself, which is a white girl, like talk about how they can't pay rent, but they're still going to go get like their eyelash extensions and things. So I mean, there are things out there that exist. Now, I'm not going to tell somebody what they need to spend their money on for self-care or whatever, right?
Yeah.
It goes back into, I don't shame people for smoking cigarettes, because there's been a lot of studies about what that might be like replacing, like in their mind, because that's their stress relief. Not everybody is in a place where they can take a vacation and be able to go do things. So it's like a mini vacation every time you take a 15-minute break. So I'm not going to judge them for that. That's their life. That's their choice. But I just wouldn't want that to be somebody feeling like they honestly have to make that choice over paying rent or over getting food for themselves or over anything, especially when it's just an aesthetic.
Yeah. That's the sad part here. It's like we as a society are so hell bent on trying to fit ourselves into something else, and again, I don't know what I can do to help make things better. There's probably nothing I can do realistically, but you see that, and you see the film, you see stuff like this, and it's just like, I feel horrible after what it was a good, informative documentary. I definitely recommend people watch it, because I think this, especially for white people, when I when I first got married, that was my education in terms of, the black hair care industry. And I think if more white people were aware of what happens in that industry and how society is kind of putting black women in a place to where they feel they have to look like this, maybe change can happen that way. So maybe what I can do is encourage people to watch this movie. I mean, it's Chris Rock. It's going to be good. It's a good
yes. Movie. I recall it being very good. Like, now that I know that it's up on Netflix, I'm probably going to watch it again. And it was funny because that's something even the Mr. Reverend has seen in the past. So, but we didn't watch it together. I think he watched it while he was deployed, because he used to be in the military and is not anymore. So,
Gotcha.
You end up watching interesting things when you're like gone for a while. So that apparently, I guess, had come across. Yeah. But yeah, definitely worth a watch. And just, I don't know, I try to put that message out to the world that if you feel like you have to do something, just pop on some skepticals for a second and ask yourself why that is. Like, we don't need to give people money for convincing us that we have to be different, because they find ways to do it to every demographic, to convince us that we need something, or we have to do something, or we need to look this way. Like, dude, the makeup products they try to push on me, even though I don't buy makeup online, but because my demographics on Facebook meet certain things, I still get stuff pushed towards me that there's no way I want. Like, I know I don't want it.
It's funny. On our TVs on the Roku, we have YouTube installed, and unfortunately, I don't have YouTube Premium, so we've got to sit through commercials. But it's interesting watching commercials on my account and watching commercials on Aubrey's account, because mine is like, what liquor do you want to buy? And hers is makeup, weight loss. And it's just like, fuck you,
Oh my God. See, par for the course weight loss stuff. Like, I'm a little bit like naturalist. Why do they keep trying to convince me that I need Shakeology, or like whatever, shake it up, lose 30 pounds, take this cortisol pill? Like, no, like, I know I post about working out, but I do it for the cortisol release, like mostly for my mental health. It is a cool side effect that it also is keeping me physically healthy. But see, my life kind of depends on keeping my cortisol in check. So I do that for my quality of life.
Yeah. Oh, and one more thing too, it did touch upon, and I thought it would be interesting to bring up was the part of the movie. I think it was near the end when black women were talking about how people react to their hair, and just how some people don't have boundaries when it comes to stuff like hair. I mean, and like there were stories of people coming up, ooh, nice hair, and like running their fingers through. It's just like, first of all,
Oh
why
yeah.
would you do that to somebody you don't know? And then secondly, yeah, why do you feel you have the right to do that? You don't. You're invading their personal space and getting rather intimate. I mean, and that's another thing they made a point about too. Chris Rock was at a barbershop, asked some black guys, do you think black guys tend to go with white women because they can do things like run their hands through their hair because it can be a more intimate thing? And you had some people say, yeah, and just if you're gonna comment on the hair, I guess I would say, for me, the general rule I take is I have to know the person a while before I'd be comfortable doing that. I'm not gonna go up to a complete stranger or a coworker that I rarely run into. That's beautiful hair. It's just you got to know when the right time is. And
Yeah.
at the end of the day, most people don't have. There's not a right time most of the time to come up to a complete stranger. I mean, depending on how you say it. But if you're
Yes.
only commenting on the hair, I mean, that is a big thing among black women, as the movie shows, but also in terms of if you had people constantly coming to you saying, oh, your hair looks beautiful, that would be a little annoying.
Yes. Well, I mean, it requires being really honest with yourself. Are you good at reading a room?
Mhm.
Because if you're not good, and it's okay if you're not good at reading people, it takes like a lot of practice. Like I'm one of the in murder mystery, the lap sitting bit. Like I didn't always sit on people's laps, but I was really good at being able to judge whether or not I could do it. And not
Mhm.
everybody has that degree. Like, but I'm going to throw it out there that I don't care how good at reading the room you are. Don't ever touch a stranger's hair. That's weird. But like
Yeah.
saying something like your hair is beautiful. I've got, because I've got like a jewel tone bright pink hair. It was also purple. And I get a lot of compliments on it out in the wild. And a lot of times it's very welcome. Like it's not creepy at all. Like people don't just come up and try to touch my frickin' hair though. Like even whenever I said one was a wig, because
Yeah.
I do characters and I've got like a long red one. I've got like the one that I use for Christmas. And because at Christmas time it's a little bit more bantery, like I got a lot of like, wow, your hair is really beautiful. I was like, it's actually a wig. And it would be a really fun conversation. But never has anybody asked to touch my hair, tried to touch my hair. So I actually do remember that part of that documentary. And now thinking about like my experience with having different hair and colorful hair, which I didn't have the first time I saw it.
Right.
But now I realize how fucking weird that is for somebody to just try to touch their hair.
Yeah.
Because I have had interesting hair now for some time, and that has never happened. And the wig would be the one where I would think somebody would ask to touch it, and that never happened. So that is just I don't know. I don't get why people would think that was appropriate to do, I guess, now that I'm thinking about it with you.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. More than likely, they're probably not thinking; they're just reacting. Ooh, touch it, and you go from there. But yeah, if you're listening to this, just be respectful. I mean, people like having compliments. When people comment on your hair or your wig, you love it. When people
Yeah.
comment on my looks, I love it. But just be respectful, and yeah, don't. Yeah, just it's
Don't touch
gross.
people. Don't touch people. Like,
Yeah.
'cause, I mean, I don't think that's so much of an issue. Like that, again, that was made like in 2009. And even if there was some stuff, it sounds like maybe if there was a little bit of a reboot in 2018, that was still the before times. So
Hmm.
I'm curious if that problem just kind of solved itself. But if we get back to some like new normal after this, like maybe let's just stick to not randomly touching people. Can we like hang on
Yeah.
to that?
Yeah.
After everybody gets vaccinated and it gets back to quote unquote normal or as normal as it's going to get.
Oh yeah, because if people act, and it's out there on how bad like retailers, for instance, are just doing the bare minimum to help people. If I think people that honestly take a look at what the world is like today because of the pandemic, hopefully, yeah, they will take that lesson to heart and make sure they don't do that. But as we see, people think that their intentions were good, so why you're wrong for being upset upset at me because I was just trying to say you had good hair as I went up to a complete stranger and put my hand on their head. No,
Yes.
don't do that.
Just don't do that. Can we keep just not like giving people space in grocery stores? Can we keep that, and can we keep roadside pickup, because that is like my favorite fucking thing right now. Like I have tried so many new places and things because I don't have to go inside.
That
Because
yeah.
when you deal with anxiety sometimes, like for example, parking anywhere downtown has put things just completely like nope on a rope. I just don't do it. If I've got like, I would do it for Postmates every now and then, but even like then I would try to avoid it like the plague. So I'm not going to do it for me personally, but you know, Salt and Straw, being able to put in an order and then meet me at my car, excelente. I will take that.
Well, that I mean, I think some grocery stores are still doing that. I hope. I mean, there needed to companies like that needed to kind of essentially grow up and join the 21st century. And I think hopefully, cross fingers, this will do that, because especially as something like a big box retailer, I don't like going into them myself.
Me
you know,
neither. Especially like, no offense to anybody who cares for Best Buy. I don't really care to shop there anymore because half the time, like, I don't know, they used to train people to like come and help you and explain technology and like what you were getting at. Now it's like, you could download the app and scan the barcode. And that was like the best we got from customer service. And that was like going through the aisles and trying to find somebody. So if that's going to be the experience, I would rather just do all of my research at home and then just show up and get a box put in my trunk. Like,
because I can tell. I started working at Best Buy in 2006. I left there in 2014. When I first started working at Best Buy, the training was probably some of the best I got in retail. But 2008 happened, and then that company, because of the economic downturn and because of Circuit City closing, like they did, and with Amazon essentially on their heels, that's when they kind of changed up, and they found a way to survive, but it really cut the integrity of that brand severely. I mean, I used to look forward to the Sunday paper and reading the Best Buy ads. Mostly it was just for the new movies and music and video games coming out, but the Best Buy ad was fun. Now the place is just, it's there. And now
I'm kind of more okay with things being there, because now I can do all of my shopping online, because I don't know, sitting there with my phone and futzing through stuff, like it is such a trigger for me when I'm out shopping. I don't like feeling like I'm in the way. So when I feel like I'm in the way, I start getting that feeling, and then I just want to get done with it. And then I end up missing stuff and things like that and having regret purchases. So I'm kind of glad there's been some stuff that's come out of this. I'm going to just go out on a limb here and say, with as much effort and money that's even been invested in some of this stuff, I don't see them going back. Especially since with Postmates and Instant Cart, like, it was already really begging for this kind of service, obviously. So now that they've had to go and figure it out themselves and even make some of those things easier for people who do the courier services to do, like, oh my God, when I first started doing courier gig work, totally different world than when I went back into it, like when the pandemic was full swing.
Right.
There's actually like stations and signs and picking up stuff, and way less attitude suddenly, because most people were just really grateful that we were out doing it because they weren't prepared for their own delivery. I've been treated like kind of not so great by some places, like as a courier. App courier, I guess I'll say. Because I worked for a few different ones, so I don't necessarily want to give one more attention than the other. But my experience was with some places really didn't like you, and some places really loved you and thought you were cool as long as you were cool to them. And then as the pandemic went in, you noticed the gratefulness kind of shift. Because in a way, we were being this cool middleman and keeping people safe and letting people stay at home, especially when the stay-at-home orders were in at the beginning there, because that's when I really picked it up. I mean, sadly, I was just more comfortable doing that job than staying at the office job with the lady hacking up a storm. Oh, she always gets allergies this time of year. Nope. I'm going to go do something where I can control that you haven't like licked your thumb and fingered through papers and put them on my desk. But so anywho, all that to say, I hope they keep some of that stuff, some of the the shopping and curbside pickup and staying away from people and be nice and don't touch people, especially without asking them. And if asking them feels creepy, don't ask. Just don't.
My fear, though, is before the pandemic, I had a big fear that in about 10 years' time, retail would look a lot different today than it is. But what this pandemic did is really sped that up. And my big fear is that you're going to have a lot of companies that will kind of shift the work from their own internal employees to utilizing more pickups to, like grocery stores. It would not shock me if I see more grocery stores install more self-checkout lanes, because that's less people they have to hire. I think, unfortunately in this country, the service and retail industry are going to be your biggest employers. And because of the changes that the pandemic has started, once things start wrapping up and start getting somewhat back to normal, I think a lot of these companies, to your point, are going to want to keep them in place. And that's going to cause a huge jump in unemployment. A lot of people, like in my shoes, for instance, I got into big box retail early in my 20s, and they paid a decent amount of a salary, enough that I didn't think about the future as much as I should have. And for people like me who did not get out of that type of environment, it's going to be scary. It's going to really be scary. And that is, while there are a lot of good things that will occur, in my opinion, I do like the fact that more grocery stores would open up self-service, because I don't like talking to people. But, the poor person who, was a cashier and is now not able to do that because of that. I mean, that's jobs missing. And how do those get replaced? I mean, the big boom today is not industrial. It's like in the computer land and Facebook land. Is Facebook really going to start hiring thousands upon thousands of people? No. Is Twitter going to do that? No. It's not the type of revolution you got in the industrial era when Henry Ford was opening up Ford Motor Company. We have to really address employment in this country. And, once we get out of the pandemic, we're still going to have a lot of problems with that. And, I just hope we come to some solution. It's not going to be perfect. I know that. I'm not going to expect an absolutely perfect reception that everybody will accept, because that is not going to happen. But,
no, it takes some work. But I will give one throwback to Solar Opposites here. So at the beginning of the show, they have little snippets that he says. He has a whole gag about Earth being a terrible home. It's stupid, and the people here are stupid. But then after that, it's something different. So it's one of those little Easter eggs at the beginning of every show.
Right.
And the last one was the funniest. It's totally relevant here. So his reason for saying that Earth was stupid is they love having robots do their job, but they do not create a system of universal income so they can have money after the robots take their jobs. It makes no sense.
Yeah.
So, and I'm not even saying that a universal income, but hey, see, I did say something positive all by myself about solar opposites by the end of this. Goal succeeded. No, I just remembered it and I wanted to Google it, but that is the quote that he had thrown in there about that. So I thought it was kind of interesting. And but yeah, I mean, there's more gig jobs. There's stuff like Literally. There's probably going to be a whole slew of other ways they're going to try to find stuff. The only downside is they don't pay as well. But
and the responsibility is clearly on you. If you are driving for Lyft and you get into a car accident, they're going to say, sucks to be you. And you are financially responsible for everything.
But there are shifts happening because of all of these app jobs, and now there is more attention to stuff like that. So there are even areas where they're trying to say, nope, you guys need to pay an hourly rate like they're working now. You're not going to get this whole just while they're taking stuff. So it'll be interesting to see where some of that stuff can maybe change things and make for some places. I'm not going to say that it's obviously not going to make enough for everybody, but I will be interested to see and how many more things come out like that. There's medical transcription editor type positions that could possibly be done the same way that Literally has kind of a quick jump training and get you in there. But it'll be interesting to see what shifts we have in the upcoming years.
And the big shifts that we need is giving the workers their power back. Take a look at what happened in Alabama with Amazon doing every dirty trick in the book to scare people into not voting for a union. they didn't vote for a union. And you got people like in California, they wanted to enact a law which would essentially make Lyft and Uber drivers employees and not independent contractors. And they fought that tooth and nail, and Uber and Lyft ended up winning that. People in this country need to wake up to that. And hopefully the next 10 to 20 years, as we deal with the aftermath of the conservative wet dream that was the Trump presidency and how he dealt with the pandemic, hopefully people will kind of see that the myth that Republicans have tried to create is just it's wrong. It's wrong. You know, that does not mean I'm pushing for like communism. You know, it's like there needs to be a balance. When one side has too much power, it makes it bad for the other side. If you find that balance, then, you know, we've had that balance in this country before. You know, in the 50s, you know, Robert Reich on his Facebook and on his documentaries will commonly bring up statistics showing that, you know, when you had, you know, unions with more power and corporations that actually paid a fair tax, the middle class was booming. When that stopped happening, we get this. So it's going to be an interesting couple of decades. That's for sure.
Yes. So stay alert.
Stay alert, stay smart, and don't be ignorant. Challenge yourself too. If there's something that comes along that disagrees with something you may believe in, challenge yourself to find out why the other, for something legitimate. I'm not talking about, you know, trying to understand Nazis, but, you know, just somebody that has a different view on unions, find out why, so you're able to talk to them. You know, I mean, more than anything, what this has shown to me is that people don't talk enough. People stay in their own bubbles, and if anybody tries to break out of that bubble or burst that bubble, people fight back. Tribalism, it's evil. It's wrong. We are all in this together. And the sooner we realize that, and the sooner we try to get that balance back, the better off we're going to be. But, you know, so far, the rich, evil people are winning. You know?
See, and I hate to put it that way. I'm neither going to agree nor disagree with you. I am open to
the race is still on.
Going in a good way. Yeah, the race is still on. Like, we're not quite Hunger Games and shit yet, so.
But in some places, kind of close.
And on some reality TV shows, man, I'm just saying, a little too close for me. A little too close. Like, some of the people's like, I need this money, and I'm like, that's a really sad reason to put yourself through this. Like,
what about that game show that was on ABC to where the contestants didn't win money, but if they won, they would have their student debt paid off? That's exploitation. That's ridiculous.
If that doesn't show how well known of a problem that is, and people like are so that was one thing that I guess I've seen on the internet, people like having this idea that, you know, bailing people out is such a horrible thing and so unfair to other people, and it's like you can just pay it back. And I was like, actually, that kind of attitude just shows your privilege on the situation. It doesn't actually make you right. It's not as simple as taking a loan and you can just pay it off. Like, there are situations that happen to people. There are honestly some situations where maybe that person should not have necessarily been given that loan, and they knew better, and that's where they get your parents to sign for it with you.
Or you had predatory schools like a University of Phoenix type.
Yep, or a school that kind of did that to me too. My first college experience, they reached out to me and found me and convinced me to come to them. And to me, that is very predatory behavior. Encouraging me to move off campus and take out more in student loans to pay for my rent was another predatory behavior I had. Yeah. So sometimes it just escalates, and not everybody has all of the resources and abilities to like pay that off later, and that is what they are finding. They're not talking about the people that the loan process works successfully for. They're talking about the fact that the demographic shows that way too many people are basically underwater on this, and that maybe that is actually a symptom of it being an error.
And that's going on the assumption that the people that are taking out these loans that can't pay them actually graduated college. What about the person that gets a whole bunch of loans, doesn't graduate, and doesn't get that fancy job that supposedly pays a lot of money that will pay that off? Those people are doubly fucked.
And doubly judged, because I can't tell you how many times people have just said that my debt problem is my fault because it's not our fault. You didn't finish school. I'm like, well, I mean, I'm sorry that it wasn't sustainable for me to finish. Life happens, and I'm not the only special person out there that life happened to. But yeah, there's a lot of like judgment on people that don't get to finish their degree, and I will say don't get to, because again, we get into a privilege thing. Life happens to humans, and they don't always like have that ability to bounce back in that way. But that doesn't mean we should necessarily say, well, sorry about you. You should have made better decisions at 16, 17 years old when you couldn't have possibly understood the long-term ramifications of signing some of this paperwork. Like, you graduate college before that part of your brain is even done developing, like your 4-year degree for most people.
And what I would say to people like that is, how many 16-year-olds can walk into a bank and get a business loan? None. I'm not going to go so far as to say none, but it would be a very rare case, and that person in question would have to have like a business plan that is so precise in terms of showing how money that could be made. So could it be done? Sure, but it's not going to happen on any sort of a regular basis. Their banks will not generally loan out to kids because they're kids. Yet when it comes to education, they're all of a sudden it's perfectly reasonable for an 18-year-old to know the full implications of taking out an $80,000 loan.
And they don't. And that's the big problem with it. And that was really, I mean, it used to be at orientation day that colleges would have like credit card companies there. Well, they've long since decided that that was predatory behavior because these are kids trying to make financial decisions. So I can't help but taste the delicious irony there that they saw the problem with that practice of like small lines of credit, by the way, like compared to how much they let you take out in student debt, that is like small potatoes. So it's kind of funny that they noticed that that was predatory and bad, but yet colleges are still kind of allowed to encourage some of this behavior overall. And it's like the rush of it, like, I'm sorry, but if you don't know what you're going to go to school for, that's maybe not the way to figure out how.
Yeah.
Like, you can totally, an option to anybody out there that is like maybe thinking about what they want to do when they graduate high school. Like, there's this whole little bit of a myth of if you don't go back immediately after, like you somehow can't or won't. But that's not true at all. Like, you can go out. Yeah, you can go out and work at a temp agency and actually maybe go out and get introduced to a bunch of jobs you didn't know existed. You may like discover a trade that you absolutely are into, and trade schools, oh my God, way cheaper than going to a 4-year university for you to like study in humanities and then leave in 4 years and still not know what to do like with that degree. Because all you did was get an degree.
that reminds me of one of the episodes of Trigger Warning with Killer Mike. I mean, he expressly said it, like he had the group of people in a room and asked them what their dream job was. And he came up with a simple fact that more than likely, you're probably not going to be able to attain that. So in the meantime, why not start off by focusing on something that you can achieve, something you can obtain, and then when you get a decent job in that, then you can take your resources in terms of studying for something else. Like I'll use myself as an example. Would I absolutely love for this podcast to be paying the bills? Sure. But I would be absolutely foolish to not have a backup. For me, that backup is going back to school, getting a degree, and working in cybersecurity. That would be great. But once that is complete, then I can go to school again for audio engineering, stuff like that, classes that will definitely benefit the podcast along the way, while having an anchor in a profession that will more than pay my bills. So it can be done, but people, if anything, people need to assess the reality reality of what, not everybody's going to grow up to be a president. And there should be no shame whatsoever in learning to be a plumber, learning to be a carpenter or something like that. There should be more career fairs in terms of allowing more of these trade schools to actually be represented and not the regular schools. I'm glad to hear that Biden is actually kind of proposing, and I think it may have been involved in the stimulus package, of making community college free for everybody. That would be awesome right there, because most people make the mistake of going to the fancy college first, not realizing that if you just spend some time in community college for a couple of years, you can knock out the boring classes for much cheaper.
Yep, that was something I totally got hoodwinked into, was this idea of like, no, get into college because it's much more of an immersive experience if you just like jump into it. Granted, I graduated high school back in 2003, so I'm not going to claim that this is still what they do, but this is the demographic that has been desperately trying to ask for help for some time now. Like, even this has gone on for generations. My stepfather died still paying off his debt with college. So this has been going on. And he finished and was in his career and still hadn't paid it off. And because of the timing that he had gotten it, like he hadn't quite fulfilled some of the forgiveness stuff, because they wouldn't backdate. They wouldn't say, no, if you've been good for 25 years, we'll forgive it. It's like, no, 25 years since it went into effect, then we'll forgive the rest of it. So he never saw that happen. And granted, it's not like, his loans didn't kill him. I don't want it to sound like that. He died for totally different reasons. But, this has been a problem. So if you're the type of person that has that little bit of a, nope, you took out the loan, you should pay it, there's a lot of complicated reasons as to why people are struggling with this. And try to come at it with a little bit of compassion, I guess, is what I ask. As being one of those people who would be very overjoyed to see something done about this, that's my one ask, is try to take compassion. I try to understand, like, everybody, like, oh, well, I had to scrape and pay mine back. I'm like, oh man, I'm glad you're able to do it.
But that is a different situation than, let's say, a beginning doctor that has to, be an intern for X amount of years or something like that, go through the grunt work before they can do the fancy stuff they want to do. Nobody, if you are really upset that, like your kids or your neighbor's kids or something like that are going to be able to have a better experience in college because they won't have to worry about crippling financial debt, you're a shitty human being. You just are. This is just because it happened bad. It's almost the same argument that you'll have, like some parents will make, like, my mother spanked me, so it's okay if I do it. No, we know it's bad now. You don't do it for a reason now, because that, when it comes to spanking, that can affect psychological stuff along the way. So there's a reason we don't do that. And now we know the reasons why, there's tons of student debt out there. And it's not because you got tons of people in this country that just want no responsibility, want all the money, but not have to deal with responsibility. That's not that. They're going to college because they want to better themselves. And yet what we need to stop are the people that are exploiting that, and it's going to be a fight. It's going to be a fight like anything else here. But again, I think the big positive we can pull from these past 4 years is, I think the general public is finally getting a whiff that business as usual is not working.
Right. Like, and I know I've mentioned it on here a few times, where there was something I heard early on of somebody saying it's like this pandemic put a magnifying glass over not just a few broken things, just kind of over everything being broken. Look what's going on with like public school, and look what's going on with like people working and remote work, and like just there's a lot to look at. And I have no interest in trying to shame people who have struggled through this, when we can like maybe just work to make things better. I get overjoyed when I know like the next round of people aren't going to deal with the things that I had to, if I feel like it is a negative experience. I don't personally understand people that think, well, I suffered, so you should have to too. Like, there's a lot of science that says that actually doesn't necessarily build a lot of character. Like, there's other ways that you can build character. It doesn't have to be through like a system basically taking advantage of you. You can totally, life is suffering. There will be other times to be disappointed that has nothing to do with predatory behavior that basically makes you stay like in an impoverished state-ish.
Yeah. I mean, I brought up my sister on the show before, and when in terms of her college experience, how she ended up getting a master's degree in religious studies with a religious organization that doesn't allow women in power, which sounds funny, sounds like I'm making a joke at her, but it's not at her expense here. It's more anger at the school, because like, she went to a private Christian college, which fine, you want to go there, fine. There are some good ones around. But, you would think an advisor would have sat her, not like
okay,
Liberty University.
I'll be good.
Like Jerry Falwell's college, it was a different story. But you would think there would have been someone that would have sat her down and said, what you are looking to do, you can achieve, but you're not going to accomplish what you think you will in this. I think if someone had sat her down and done that, then she would have definitely took and utilized her resources in different ways in school, getting a different type of career. Because, with a master's degree and now she's walking dogs, it's just like, and again, I want to make it clear because she listens. I'm not knocking her. I'm knocking the system that put her in that place. She's not the dumb one because she didn't know, and she was put in that spot unnecessarily by that school that gladly took her money and is gladly still taking her money, and she has nothing to show for it because of that. That sucks. That's fucked up. That should not happen. And if anybody,
Oh, go ahead. Sorry, if anybody.
Yeah. If anybody disagrees with that, if anybody wants to put the blame on her for that, think about what you're saying. You're saying that someone just out of high school, in my sister's case, is going to have enough knowledge to know that taking out $300,000 in loans is a good idea.
Right. And see, that was a lot of my experience too. My first university was a private Christian university. And yeah, they had that a lot, which is amazing because the particular brand of Christianity they were also did not have women in leadership. There was actually a whole thing where I wanted to speak like to our college youth group. Mm-hmm. And the youth leader at the time really liked the message that I wanted to give, and he had to actually fight with like the uppers to allow me to speak to my peer group, and I wasn't allowed to interpret anything about the Bible. Like, I got rules before, and the only reason they allowed it was during the summer when most of the students were gone. So as long as I followed their rules, and as long as I was cool with only doing this once during the summer, when it was smaller anyway, it was okay. But a lot of my experience with that school, especially like kind of there was this little bit of sexism, so to speak, that most of the women there like weren't actually expected to graduate and do something with that. You were basically paying to hopefully make a love connection. Exactly. Yeah. So that's why like they didn't really, that was the opinion. When I did ask, because I've always been a curious person, and it totally got me in trouble at that school too. Some people don't like being asked questions. But I did
religious people, what?
I did ask, like, hey, like if the religion that this whole school is based on, I'm just curious, like, I'm not saying they shouldn't allow women to do that, but it's just interesting that it is encouraged so much. And they said, well, because they're being a good Christian, they're really getting their degree to just learn more about God in an intimate way, not because we expect them to actually go on and do anything with it. So, yep, there's the eye roll for anybody who does not watch this, just the biggest eye roll. But yeah, that was their justification. I personally don't think that getting into a lot of debt to hopefully meet a husband is like personally a good choice, but not every female that is signing up for this realizes that's kind of the thought process. So they're not going to talk you out of it because ultimately they are still a business.
Yeah.
And they
Yeah.
still think you're getting something out of it. Just throwing that out there. They still think you're getting something worth the money out of it by coming to their school. You are also going to be taking classes, so you're more likely to meet like a man of God. So that's kind of what they feel is what you're supposed to kind of get. And I can't say that like everybody and for now, but that was the gist that I got from somebody who ran that department at the school that I went to.
Yeah, and obviously anybody listening experiences vary depending on the college, blah, blah, blah. And I'm sure there are some private Christian schools out there that are run impeccably well, but still.
Oh, yeah, that are cool and inclusive and more up to date in some of like the thinking. I totally believe that has to exist. I don't speak in the absolutes that all of anything is bad, because I just think that would just not be such a great attitude to have in life. But I've had my issues with that, and I've totally come down, because I used to be like an all bad person, and now it's like, nah, that's just you speaking out of your own trauma shit. So let's not punish everybody for my shit experience, and that's kind of where I landed with it. But
yeah. Now let's move on to a different topic. You made an announcement on the Facebook page. Do you want to talk about it?
Yes, we could talk about it a little bit. I think I'll save going into more depth in this until possibly later on. We've got like Pride Month is in June, and there was another friend that I know really wanted to have like an in-depth conversation, but I do want to lightly touch on it because I did bring it up. I'm pretty sure it's not a secret that I've talked on the show that I consider myself a non-binary person, but something that I wanted to bring some personal awareness to. And what's funny is I had some really cool conversations on my personal Facebook with this too, is I would like to help normalize gender neutral pronouns. And there are some that exist that's not just referring to them as they and them. There are some pride and support groups that are really seeming to put their back behind this and their belief behind this. So I like it. I'm down with it. But essentially, you're replacing he, him, or she, her with Z, which is spelled Z-E, and here, which is spelled H-I-R. And I decided to introduce that. I had a lot of really cool conversation because on my personal Facebook one, I said, I'm open for questions if you have them. I got a really funny one actually from one of our friends that's in the group, asking if, they could still call me dude or dudette. And I got to share the opinion that I've always kind of felt dude was a gender neutral term. But I'm not offended by being called either pronoun. It even got into it with somebody asking me if this is my way of announcing my pronouns, and I was like, I guess it is, but I still don't think I'm going to be offended if anybody calls me, she or her or he or him. And that's just my takeaway, is I don't really find it offensive to be any of those things. So I personally don't get offended by being called any of those things, especially if they're cool with me having like a conversation about it.
Yeah.
And then I did get the question that I knew would happen. It was like, what's wrong with they? And I can't tell you how many silly miscommunications can happen by referring to a singular person to sound like multiple people. Like there have been times where they are on the way and I go, oh, who's coming with them? Yeah. And then it turns into like a little bit of an awkward, funny haha back and forth, because fortunately it's been with friends and it's not been a big deal because they understand that I'm not trying to be a jerk. Like when I accidentally put my foot in my mouth, it is of genuine heart. And then, vice versa when, they're on their way and, you think that multiple people are coming and only one is coming. So I support it, and there's a little bit of speculation on why does it have to be close to like he and her, but to me it's just about flowing with the language. I'm sure we can have a whole conversation on opinion of this if
like you said, we have someone in mind that we're going to be bringing on the show at some point that we can get into a much more in-depth conversation about it. But still, I thought, if we're going to end things, let's end things on a positive note, Yeah,
we had, like I said, it led to some really cool conversations, even kind of one where it kind of came out where, the person didn't even, not that they like disagreed with it and said, no, I won't call you that, but it did result in a conversation. I was like, but you know what? My goal wasn't to convince you if it was a good idea. My goal is just now that if you hear somebody put Z or here on like their name tag or asking about it as a preference, you can kind of know what that means. And it's not even necessarily just for non-binary people, just throwing it out there. This is very much something that it's like, yes, if we would like to do some gender neutral pronouns that don't rely on knowing, this is what the community's kind of come together and put out there.
And it's important too. I mean, because I think of like the term cis male, and all that is indicating is just heterosexual male. It's the reason these phrases are coming up these days is like when it comes to like the cis male, for instance, that's to kind of take out the word of normal, because what is normal? That would imply that trans people are not normal. That is not the case at all. So kind of adjusting our language is going to be important going forward, and respecting that too. Now to your point, yeah, of course, I think people in your shoes that do announce the pronouns expect that not every friend is going to be 100% accurate each and every time. I get that.
Yeah.
But the point of the matter is for people like in my shoes, I refer to myself as he, him, and douchebag sometimes, but hey, no. But it's for people like me to have the myths dispelled. It's let's not have a definition of normal, because describing a cis male as normal is not right. I'm not normal just because I was born with the genitalia that I have. It just like a person that has a change, going from female to male, they're not somehow less of a man because they weren't born with that. They are. And that's the importance of addressing these labels, and admittedly it will not come off natural at first.
Oh yeah, but that was kind of my argument for I'm kind of okay with them sounding similar to words that we already use. Language is very much something that evolves.
Mhm.
And we've added so much to our language, we've even taken some words away from our language. So I'm just throwing it out there that if you're interested in possibly using some gender neutral pronouns, these Z and here are kind of the front runners. There are a lot, by the way, but as far as these are the more common ones, feel free to use them. Feel free to look out there and see what's out there. Maybe be open to answering questions with friends. It went really well, like on my personal one, just throwing it out there. It wasn't that bad. And you can always use that conversation to flesh out people you don't need in your life. Just throwing that out there too. If somebody wants to be an asshole to you just because you posted something about, maybe entertaining using gender neutral pronouns, like maybe you just don't need to be friends with that person anymore. You don't have to do it with some stank. You could just be like, okay, we don't match anymore.
The block button is your friend.
Oh, yes. Or even just unfriending. Like, it doesn't necessarily have to be like a torch on the bridge or anything. Or put them on your restricted if you want to be super passive aggressive about it. I love using the restricted. Or yeah, you can unfollow them. I love the restricted. Like, because then it's, if you want to be like, nope, you're grounded. You can see my public facing stuff. Yeah. And they don't know, like they won't know unless they put together they can't see certain things anymore. And if you don't share anything publicly, obviously they'd probably put that together. But you can totally utilize social media editing to like kind of navigate people in your life.
Exactly. Now, before we wrap up, do you want to mention the date that we are recording this is the 20th anniversary of the passing of Joey Ramone. So I know I was absolutely shocked that you did not know any Ramone songs.
And that turned out to not be true because there's Blitzkrieg Pop and whatever. But the problem was you gave me the name of a human, and I'm not always good at relating that just because I was like, I feel like this has something to do with the Ramones, but I don't remember if that was a human's name or if the band was just called the Ramones and it was like not related to a name. And then so you look up Terry, was it Terry Ramone or something like that?
No, Joey Ramone.
Oh, Joey. Sorry. See, I'm shit with names. Good thing I just said that. Terry Ramone here. No, so I looked up like top songs from Joey Ramone because I was driving, so I used like my little Google Magic Talk to it, make it tell me things. It's like the top 10 for Ramon, it was like, in all of the ones they listed, I was like, I have no fucking clue what Tim is talking about then. And then you sent me like the Spotify list, and the first song that played was Blitzkrieg Bop. And I was like, oh, okay, now I feel kind of stupid. Of course I know who that is.
Yeah, for people out there, I mean, if you've watched any sporting event, you've heard the Ramones. If you've watched the recent Spider-Man movies, they end with Ramones songs in there, so you've heard them. All I'm gonna say is he was a wonderful musician, wonderful singer, unique voice. Sure, he was not gonna sing opera, but for the type of goofy stuff that I like, tonight I'm probably gonna watch Rock and Roll High School again because of that. What a wonderful film there. So do you have anything else you want to add before we wrap things up?
Oh, no. I think this was it was kind of a hodgepodge of conversation, but I think it was still fun to have. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. We didn't go off the rails or get too ranty or get too cranky because an internet person didn't like me for a second.
Yeah.
No, it's okay. I really don't.
And she froze up here. Okay. That looks like we may not be getting Tracy back here. And I love the expression on her face as it is frozen here. Okay, can you see me? Oh, it moved a little bit, and I'm just seeing. I hear a laugh.
Subscribe to Friends Talking Nerdy on iTunes, the Google Play Music Store, as well as Spotify. Remember to support Friends Talking Nerdy on Patreon. Goodbye, darling.